Happy Independence Day from NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California. I'm DC Agel, and this is a media briefing about the Juno mission to Jupiter. Well, Juno is currently 11 hours and 516,000 miles away from Jupiter, and tonight at 8:18 p.m. Pacific, it will fire its main engine for JOI, or Jupiter Orbit Insertion. Here to talk about Juno, the science of Jupiter and Juno, and Jupiter Orbit Insertion, we have with us today Jim Green, Director of Planetary Science, NASA Headquarters, Washington. Scott Bolton, Juno Principal Investigator, Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio. Rick Nybakken, Juno Project Manager from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And Heidi Becker, Juno Radiation Monitoring Lead Investigator, and she is from JPL as well. And we'll start things off with Jim Green. Jim?
Thank you very much, DC. What a wonderful day to celebrate. You know, this is a milestone for our country, but it's a milestone for planetary science. We've had a number of probes fly by Jupiter. Galileo actually was our last probe to Jupiter that orbited it for many years. It studied the planet, but only surface deep, looked at all the moons, and now we have a chance with Juno to go back and study the planet in its own right. Juno was part of a program we call New Frontiers. It's the second in the series of New Frontiers missions. Last one was New Horizons, which flew by Pluto. These are well-focused missions, spectacular missions in their own right, studying a set of science we can only get by dedicating many people across the country to develop a spacecraft to go after the science we want. This is a spectacular time for us. As DC said, in one Jupiter rotation, we'll be there. And so let's learn much more about the mission. Scott?
Thanks, Jim. So happy 4th of July, everyone. I've always loved 4th of July. In fact, that's my favorite holiday. And I think this is my favorite 4th of July that I've ever had. And I'm really excited. The team's excited. We're barreling down on Jupiter really quick. It's been an amazing journey. It's hard to believe after 15 years we're finally arriving there. Can I get my first slide? So here you see Jupiter and its Galilean moons. It's like a little mini solar system. So we passed Callisto yesterday at about 11 a.m. Ganymede was next. Happened last night, about 4 a.m. In about an hour and a half, we will pass Europa. It's getting very real. And then finally, later this afternoon, a little after 2, we will pass Io, the innermost moon of the Galilean moons. And so we're headed there. It's happening. We're moving really fast through this system. Next slide. And here's where we're going. That's our target. Here is, you see, undoubtedly, and it is the king of our solar system. This is it, the largest planet, more massive than all the other planets and everything else in our solar system combined, other than the sun. This beautiful picture of its zones and belts, the great red spot, this incredible turbulent atmosphere. We've known it for many, many years. It's a gorgeous planet. What Juno's about is looking beneath that surface. We've got to go down and look at what's inside, see how it's built, how deep do these features go, learn about its real secrets. That's what Juno's about. Next slide. But it's not that easy. Here's what we're facing. So here you see a VLA image. This is a radio image of Jupiter, which is showing the extreme radiation belts that surround this planet. They're the equivalent idea of what we have around Earth called Van Allen radiation belts. But Jupiter's are on steroids. They're a very serious hazard. The yellow First, the lines going around Jupiter that are coming around are the magnetic field lines that are trapping these particles. The yellow is where the most intense radiation is. We're looking at electrons that are moving very close to the speed of light. These things go right through anything we know, pretty much. We try to avoid that yellow spot as best we can. The trick to Juno is come in over the north, slide between that yellow spot and the body or the atmosphere itself, and then come out the south. But you can see, even sliding through and doing that, you can't avoid the green zones, which are the tame part of Jupiter, but many, many times worse than Earth. So this is the true hazard of Jupiter. Now, what's not seen on here is another hazard that we haven't spoken very much of, which is Jupiter also has a ring around it, a ring of debris, dust, meteorites. They extend out just past these red parts of these radiation zones. We've only gotten a few images of that. It's believed that they're also extended. Let me have the next slide. Here you see the rings. So these rings show the rings going out to about 1.5 or 2 Jovian radii, but there's a vertical extent of these rings that isn't very well known. Juno has to pass through these rings. We do not know how close to the planet they actually go. And if it gets hit, even by a big piece of dust, even a small piece of dust, it can do very serious damage. One of the vulnerabilities that we have to face is the fact that we had to open our engine door, so the nozzle is open and vulnerable. We're flying through faster than any object has ever gone with the nozzle facing forward. If any dust is in our way and hits that nozzle, it will knock a hole right through the coating that protects the nozzle and allows the engine to burn uninterrupted. So that's one of the big gambles, is we've done everything we can. We've protected everything we can, as best we can. We've modeled it, but we're going into unknown territory. So you've got the radiation, and you've got this dust and meteorite scare. So that's part of what we're facing, but we are built like an armored tank. And to hear more about that armored tank, I'm going to pass it to Rick, who will tell you some of the activities later today and how we deal with them.
Good morning. I'm incredibly thrilled to be here, but it is a little surreal. I've been on this mission 10.5 years, and it's still a little hard to believe that today's the day we go into orbit around Jupiter. So let me introduce you to the Juno spacecraft. It's a spin-stabilized polar orbiter. It will operate farther from the sun than any other solar-powered mission in history. And it's the first solar-powered spacecraft to ever operate at Jupiter. And when you look at it, what really jumps out at you are the size of these solar arrays. These massive solar arrays are 60 square meters in area. And even though we're receiving only 1/25 of the sunlight at Jupiter that we would at Earth, these massive arrays provide over 500 watts of power. We have 18,698 solar cells on these arrays. The other thing you notice when you think about this mission is, how do we protect our critical electronics, the electronics that control the main engine burn tonight? How do we protect them from this intense radiation environment? We chose to house our electronics in a solid titanium walled vault, our radiation vault. It's where we protect our valuables, if you would. Heidi's going to talk a little bit more about that, but I wanted to introduce you to that because the solar arrays and the radiation vault are two signature innovations on this really creative mission that we've undertaken. May I have the first video, please?
Ignition and liftoff of the Atlas V with Juno on a trek to Jupiter, a planetary piece of the puzzle on the beginning of our solar system.
So this was when our journey began way back in 2011. We launched from Florida at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Our trajectory took us out past Mars orbit, where we fired our main engine twice. And we looped back around the sun and did an Earth flyby. We got incredible gravity assist here that added 70% of the velocity that we got from the launch vehicle That extra burst of velocity and speed gave us enough energy to get all the way out to Jupiter's orbit. So this long 5-year cruise has given us a lot of time to get familiar with how the spacecraft operates. And more importantly, when you fire the main engine twice, and we did it very successfully, the third time should be a charm. But there's a nuance here, and the nuance, this will be the first time we've ever fired the main engine at Jupiter. And it's a make or break for us. To help us succeed in that, even if we get a surprise from the environment, we added a capability called JOI restart, which means that if there is a computer reset for any reason, the sequence will cycle through and restart the engine automatically. We need to get into orbit tonight, and I'm very confident that we will. So let me show you a little bit more about the sequences that will take place tonight. So we approach high over the North Pole, and you guys are the sun. So the spacecraft is facing the sun until we start our turn right around the time we hit the North Pole. So we'll start our turn around 7:30 p.m. And we'll start to spin up at this point up to 5 RPM. We start our main engine burn around 8:18 p.m. all the way through closest to point approach to the planet. We'll complete the main engine burn around 8:53 p.m., spin down to 2 RPM, and then turn back to the sun. Very critical for a solar-powered mission. Before we arrived at the planet, we finished our setup in preparation for the main engine burn. We opened the main engine cover 2 weeks ago. We pressurized the propulsion system 5 days ago. That's a very delicate thing, and it came off just as we expected, so we're ready. We're ready to fire our main engine tonight. And could I have the next animation, please? So there's another challenge that we face when we fire the main engine. It takes 48 minutes for the signal from the spacecraft to reach Earth. It's a 35-minute burn. That means by the time the burn is complete, we won't even hear about it till 13 minutes later. So it's a fully automated sequence, and we've tested this sequence very, very thoroughly. We're confident it's going to be successful. We track what's going on tonight by using Doppler and tones. Doppler, if you've ever seen a car approaching you or listened to it, and the pitch goes up when it approaches you and the pitch goes down when it moves away, we use a similar technique tracking the position of the spacecraft. And that'll be on display in our MSA tonight. We also use a special communications mode called tones. Most of our normal communications antennas, when we turn to do the burn, are not pointed at Earth anymore. So we have to use a special mode where we send tones down that mark all of our milestones as we move through the burn. And I can tell you, when we receive the last tone that tells us the burn is successful, it'll be music to my ears. It's a 35-minute burn. The engine has 635 newtons of thrust, and it'll increase our velocity. Actually, against Jupiter, it'll slow us down by about 542 meters per second. So one last thing. At the end of our journey here, what we're targeting is a space that's tens of kilometers wide. We're going to hit that within 1.2 seconds after a journey of 1.7 billion miles. That tells you just how good our navigation team is. So to tell you more about the intense radiation environment that we're going to be operating in, I'll pass it over to Heidi.
Thank you. So at about 7:30 tonight, Juno is going to go into the scariest part of the scariest place that we know about, because we don't know about it. It's the part of Jupiter's radiation environment where nobody has ever been. And as Scott mentioned, these are high-energy electrons that are so energetic, they're moving at the speed of light because Jupiter's magnetic field has accelerated them to the point where they will go right through a spacecraft and strip the atoms apart inside your electronics and fry your brain if you don't do anything about it. So we did a lot about it. But I'd like to show you exactly how those electrons are moving. And if I could have the first animation. So this is how fast they're really moving. They're spiraling around the magnetic field lines, and they're bouncing up and down between magnetic mirror points in a few seconds. Imagine something like that hitting you. This is only one. There will be millions and millions of them hitting Juno tonight. And once they do, the minute they hit that spacecraft, they will ricochet and create shrapnel of photons and other particles, which will then scatter. And that's what gets in and degrades the electronics. So in order to protect Juno, we did a couple of very important things. And the first thing was the work of our navigation team. They designed a very special polar orbit that not only allows Juno to do its science, but it allows us to protect ourselves a little bit from the radiation. So if I could have the next animation, please. In this animation, you'll see how our trajectory allows Juno to fly around the really harsh parts of the radiation belts near the equator and duck underneath when we get very close to the planet. But we still have these very high intensity regions near the planet that we can't avoid. And later in the mission, we get further and further into the equatorial region, and that's where we're really going to start to degrade. So we did something else, which is our radiation vault. And if I could have the next animation. If we hadn't done anything else, Juno would experience something equivalent to a human being having 100 million X-rays in less than a year. And so what we've done to protect Juno and bring that dose down by a factor of 800 is to build a wall of titanium around the most sensitive electronics, and that wall is about 1/2 inch thick. Brings the dose down, a little bit is still going to get in, and that is the area where the heart and brain of Juno is. That's what's going to have to work tonight so that all those steps play out at the right time, in the right order, and for the right period of time. And what I'd like to show you is where Juno will be exactly when that's going to happen. So if I could have the next animation. This is a model of our radiation belts, of Jupiter's radiation belts near the planet. This is what Juno will be flying through while it's going through all those steps that Rick just described. So you see, you can't avoid that nasty red. Juno goes through that twice. So think about Juno tonight at 7:30 and at 8:18 and at every moment after that, and send a good wish to it. So back to you, Scott.
Okay, so after more than 15 years, we're finally arriving there. It's incredibly exciting. This is a great journey. And as you can tell, it is not easy for NASA to get the answers that humanity's seeking here. Juno's really searching for some hints about our beginnings, how everything started, how did the solar system get started. But these secrets are pretty well guarded by Jupiter, and it's pretty formidable. So the team, as you would imagine, is incredibly excited with anticipation, mixed with the incredible tension of the reality of what we face. I can assure you that every technical aspect of human ingenuity has gone into this to figure out how we can conquer Jupiter today. It's not without risk, but we have some of the world's best engineers working on this. As Heidi pointed out, and Rick, the navigation is remarkable. Ever since I've been at JPL and working with NASA, which is quite a long time, I've been amazed that they can go where they go and get there and figure it out and hit these incredible narrow spots. I can't even drive to the store that well. So I'm really impressed with the engineering here and all through NASA. And as we arrive, I've got another last treat that we can show you.